Hello, everyone. I don't know how much of this you can clearly hear or see. The lighting's not the best, and I'm currently sitting in the back patio of my Vietnamese villa. I'm currently in the town of Hoi An, and it is gorgeous here, but we don't have any ideal recording location right now, so we're just gonna make do with what we have in this cute little back patio section. So if you do hear motorbikes, that's because I'm recording in like an open air setting. But today in this episode, I thought I would share with you some of the thoughts that I have had to dig up and unlearn in my self discovery process. You guys already know that I've been here in Southeast Asia doing a little bit of an experiment on myself on the surrender and on surrendering to the flow of life. And in my surrendering to the flow of life, I've discovered a lot of things that have existed in my life and in my self concept that I didn't know were still there and have been affecting me to this day, to this point, and have been holding me back to evolving into my next level self. And I feel like I have to say that for me, a lot of the time, this inner work didn't really, like the inner work that I've been doing up until this point in my business and my personal development journey, I thought, you only ever really had to do it once and then it was one and done. And even though that may be the case for some people, most of the time there needs to be multiple reiterations of growth and transformation. And when you have uprooted a certain belief or gone from one version of yourself into another, sometimes you'll evolve to a certain degree, and then the next level requires you to evolve again. So I mentioned this a little bit in my previous episode when I was recording in Makati in Philippines, but I feel like I thought, it would be really helpful for me to share with you some of the very specific things that I have had to basically unlearn because they were so deeply ingrained into my paradigm of life and my way of viewing the world, myself, and everything in it. And these are the thoughts that more specifically have applied in this chapter of my life. And I hope that by sharing them, you will feel inspired and that you can take some of these thoughts as well and ask yourself if in any way you have also been held back by these thoughts. I do want to say before going into them, I have about 7, is that you you will have your own thoughts as well, right? Like these are just iterations of how they've shown up for me, and there are so many other thoughts that are probably hidden and are existing in your world. And it's so important to just know that every person's experience and paradigm of life is different because it's shaped by our personal experiences and our past conditioning and all the things. So if you resonate with it, great. If it doesn't, then just witness, observe, and find what thoughts are currently in your paradigm that maybe may not be helping you enter your next level. Okay, so let's get into it. The first thought that I wrote down is I don't have to prove myself right to be significant. People are entitled to their own opinion. And this is a thought that I have intentionally began to think because there was a season in my life where I felt like I always had to be right in order to be validated or in order to have some level of authority or significance. And I don't know exactly where this came from, but I feel like culturally, maybe that was how I saw significance or dominance could be asserted if you were right. Maybe it was in my upbringing, maybe it was just in my schooling. I don't know, but I think for many of us, we can probably relate to this experience where we sort of have to be the last one talking, or we have to prove ourselves to be right, and our opinion has to be the right one, and everybody else has to be wrong because it just makes us feel good, it makes us feel more validated. And I have learned that wanting to be right all the time does not serve us. People are entitled to their own opinion, and they will have their own opinion and thoughts, and you will never be able to control them. So it's like such a waste of energy to try to control them. For me, I really saw this as almost a way of trying to have control when, if somebody had a different opinion to me, I wouldn't necessarily be like, you're wrong and I'm right, but I would really try to prove myself through explaining, through evidence. And this also manifested in ways where, like, I had to also always be right about the things that I said needed to happen. So if I set a goal or a plan and it didn't go to according to what I set or planned, then I would beat myself up about it. And it was like this unhelpful self-sabotage about needing to be right, otherwise I was not good enough, and it's just not true. So that's something I really had to unlearn. So I moved through that by reminding myself that people are just going to have their own opinion about everything, and you're never going to be able to control it. It's just going to be such a waste of energy to try to. The second thing is how other people perceive me is completely out of my control. What matters most is how I perceive myself. This has been really powerful, especially lately, because I feel like traveling solo, you really just have to stop caring about what people think about you. You have to stop caring about whether people are going to look at you weird if you're sitting on your own, or if people are going to look at you funny when you take out a camera and talk to it, or take a video or a photo of yourself. You have to put your inhibitions to the side when you go to a destination you've never been to before, and you're going to be doing things, you're going to look really silly doing things for the first time. And it's a very, very great lesson to learn while solo traveling, to be honest. But I feel like for a long time, and even now in some ways, I feel like I do still care a lot about what people think of me. I feel like I learned this a lot growing up because, coming from an Asian background, coming from Filipino culture as well, there's a lot of, I guess, like, pride around how you look and what you do, who you are, how you present yourself. Your self-presentation always mattered. How you dressed, what you wore, what brands you had. And I mean, it depends on your family, obviously, but for me, my experience was a lot to do with, like, how proper I looked, and then also the accomplishments I had educationally. And so if I was doing well, then my parents would brag about it, or if my brother was doing well, then it would be the topic of the family conversation. So there were these things that were very, like, unintentionally conditioned, but it taught me as a child to believe that people's perception of me matters a lot, and I had to really take care of that image, that self-concept. That perception, and so that affected my self-concept, that I always needed to be presentable and to please other people. That's essentially it. That's how we learn to people please. And so my thought was, how other people perceive me is really out of my control. What matters most is how I perceive myself, because just like I've experienced on this trip and through my development of self-confidence all across the past few years, it's that I really don't, the more that I give myself permission to just, like, do things and not care what other people think, like starting out with going on a solo date with myself, going to the movies by myself, or I don't know, like going for a long walk by the beach by myself, buying myself dinner by myself, like all these little practices, I learned to really be shameless in how I present myself. And I really learned to also detach from what people would think of me. I noticed as well that in content, it's a very similar experience, especially for my clients in business and my audience in business. You guys will get it. It requires a lot of shamelessness and letting go of what other people are going to think of you, to whip out a camera or to ask somebody to take a photo of you or to talk to a camera, and to be open to so much judgment and criticism from strangers online. So it's one of the most liberating things to work through, and I encourage you to work through it if it's something that you feel like maybe you envy the person who can talk to a camera, or you want to be that person who can dress really cute and then go and take a photo in front of that really cool place. Like, whatever it shows up as for you, I definitely invite you to explore how it might be a people-pleasing issue and explore ways that you can move through it. It's, again, going to look different for every single person, but that's just how I've been able to move through it, and am still moving through it as well. I mean, traveling to so many different Asian countries, people stare at you, like they stare at you. It's just a thing here. And I used to get really uncomfortable when people just stare at me for no reason. Now I'm like just having fun with it. Like I'm just like, okay, stare as much as you want. Like I'm doing me. Now, the third thing is every judgment or comment I have towards someone else is simply a projection of my own inadequacy or insecurity. This is a heavy one. Any judgment or comment that you make towards somebody else that isn't nice is most likely a projection of something that you are feeling insecure or scarce about within yourself. And I've really caught myself on this anytime that I'm envying somebody who has a result that I am yet to attain. Or if somebody has a quality, for example, like they maybe are really outgoing or funny, or maybe they always speak their mind and it's quite harsh or bold, I find myself often getting uncomfortable in these situations around these types of people. And I used to think that, oh, they're the problem, right? Again, very harsh, but very true. We all have these thoughts. We're all human. And I realized that, okay, what if I use that as an opportunity to look inward at what this is telling me about myself? And I realized that, hey, maybe it's telling me that I actually want that quality and I don't feel like I have it or can create it or access it. And so that gave me a little bit more permission to firstly release judgment of the person, and secondly to just explore what the work needed to be done within myself. And a lot of it was to do with the previous point about feeling too ashamed to express myself, or like way back when I was younger, if I was too loud or too bold or too different, it would mean that I wasn't acceptable or I was told to quieten down, and that's why I would envy the people who weren't quiet or the people who were really bold. So, yeah, for me, that is just always an invitation to look inward. The fourth thing that I've written down is comparison is a waste of energy. It does not bring about true confidence or validation. It only creates a fleeting sense of safety, which eventually gives way to more insecurity. Comparison might feel good for a moment. It might make you feel better about yourself. It might make you feel like you're more special or you're more accomplished, but needing to tread on other people's backs to feel good about yourself is only a temporary high, and it's not even a real high. It gives you a fleeting sense of safety, and then it goes away. And so, yeah, compare yourself to make yourself feel better, or to compare yourself in the best of ways to your past version of yourself in order to feel like you've made progress or whatever it is you need to do. But don't rely on comparison to build your confidence, because it really is a fleeting source of confidence. It's not going to last. And so for me, I know this showed up a lot with like business results. I would compare myself to who I was a few years ago and use that to make myself feel better. Or I would compare myself to somebody who doesn't have the results, and even like my clients, not in a negative way, but in a way to be like, I've got this, right? And while that might seem really harmless, I realized that actually wasn't truly serving me in the best way. It was just giving me a false sense of security, a temporary sense of security. What would have been better is for me to actually acknowledge that comparison it's not even an effective strategy to confidence. And usually you're only really comparing so that you can feel more confident or you can feel more validated and acknowledged. And so I feel like the alternate to using your energy on comparison is to simply work on truly appreciating and loving yourself as is, without needing a measurement or without needing something or someone else to compare it to, including your past self, right? Because what if you could just sit with who you are today and love that version of you and really appreciate that version of you? That would be an unconditional self-love, and I think that's so much more powerful. And that feeling isn't fleeting. It's true and it's honest. It takes more work, but it is definitely much more powerful. The third last thing that I've written down is settling for what's stable. Settling for what's stable does not create fulfillment. It actually takes you further away from it. Just because it's stable doesn't mean it's the best place to be. I'm learning that stability doesn't have to look like the way that everybody else defines stability. And in reality, when you can clearly define what stability looks like for you, you want to love that picture, whatever it looks like. Because if you don't, settling for everybody else's version of what's stable won't make you any happier. It doesn't create fulfillment. Settling for stability versus settling for your version of what feels the most abundant and sufficient is very, very different. Sufficiency is different to stability. Stability can look very promising when you've got all the external things, the external accomplishments, the validation. But you can have stability without having self-sufficiency. You can have all the things and yet be extremely self-destructive with your thoughts. Self-sufficiency is being able to rely on yourself completely, to be able to take care of your own needs, to know that you have enough and you are enough and you always will be enough. And oftentimes we mistake stability for sufficiency and we chase things that make us feel stable. But really, it is no less secure once you have those things and you realize that hard and fast once you've created it. I've had that experience many times in my life where I've chased monetary goals, physical possessions, and material possessions, and all these accolades and status, these status things that I thought would be significant, would create a level of stability. And I didn't feel any more sufficient, right? What we're really searching for is not stability. As humans, we love to grow. It's our nature to grow. It's our nature to want to expand. So that's why even when you create the thing that you want, like the result you want, you'll find that it'll only be a matter of time until you have bigger goals and you want to progress onto the next level. It's our nature to keep wanting to evolve. And so what we actually don't want is, what we actually want is not stability. What we actually want is to be able to have a deep relationship with ourselves of unconditional love and to feel that we are sufficient wherever we go, whatever we have, whatever we accomplish, because that is true fulfillment. Okay, so our goal in life is not to get to one end destination. That's not the goal. The second last point is keeping to myself keeps me playing small. I limit myself by trying to not make a ruckus, a fuss, or to be noticeable. I learned at a very young age that I needed to sit pretty, to be quiet, to do what I was told, to be obedient. And I learned through, Asian discipline and witnessing this happen, that if I stepped out of the lines, then I would be in trouble. And I learned how to be a really, really good rule follower, to the point where I just find it really hard to bend any rules, like to lie about anything. I find it really hard to, when a sign says do not do this, I find it really hard to not do that, even if it's the most harmless thing. I was in Singapore and literally I was like, this gives me peace of mind that there are signs and rules for everything, because I just felt like it was everyone obeyed the law, versus maybe in a country where there's no real rules. I find that really, really hard, because you kind of just make the rules, right? You kind of just cross the road whenever you want. Cars drive anywhere, and it's really hard. Same thing with if a sign says do not touch and my partner just wants to touch the thing, whatever it is, I don't know, like a wax figure or something. He will touch it and I'm just like, no, I'm not touching that. And it's the most harmless thing, but I feel like I just had a really hard time with breaking rules because of that mentality and that conditioning. And as a result, it's affected the way that I can really break out and make a difference in my own unique way in the world, because I need to make a fuss. I need to be loud. I need to be different. I need to stand out. I need to color outside the box. And so I feel like sometimes when you have been conditioned to do things according to the book and to obey the rules, or else, right, it gets really hard to begin to scale to the next level or to stand out in your own unique way, where you sort of just put blinders on and you tune out of everybody else and you just do things your way. It can feel really hard to do that because you're not used to being seen as you are, and to also be bold and different, right? Because you're so used to being shut down for being different, especially if you've had that very similar experience as a young person. Maybe you tried to express yourself, maybe you colored your nails and you got told off for it, or maybe your school told you everybody needed to look the same. So this conditioning, it gets hardwired into our system, and then it sabotages us later down the line when we try to do unique, bold, and exciting things. Okay, the final thing that I've written down is there is an abundant supply always. More will always come. Enjoy what is in front of you because you choose to, not because you feel obligated to in order to not waste it, or because you're thinking about what you lack. Enjoy nice things, enjoy them often. It's something you're entitled to every single day. So don't deprive yourself because you're worried that you're not going to have it again. Doing a lot of things because of fear that you're not going to have it again it was my story, it's my mantra, it's the context that I've come from, especially when it comes to money. And so I feel like I could do an entire episode on this, and I will, but I feel like the lesson in this one was definitely to do with being able to just be present with the beauty of what there is in front of me, and to not be thinking way too far ahead, or thinking about what I'm losing or what has happened in the past that's gonna affect what's gonna happen after this. Like, to really just be in the moment and to savor it, experience it, and to love it. And I find that especially when there's money involved, for example, like you spent a lot of money on a plate of food that you kind of feel guilty for having, or an experience that is sort of way beyond your budget and you didn't plan for it, it can feel like you can't enjoy the moment because you're too busy thinking about the lack of losing money, or the lack of just the feeling of resistance. But I feel like the best way to learn this is to just be in nature a lot, because nature will teach you that there is an abundant supply of everything, that everything gets taken care of no matter what, no matter how big or how small. Just spend some time in nature. I promise you, it will really, really open your eyes. And for me, that's how I really come to unlearn the programming that there is a scarcity, and that I need to always be worrying and taking and planning everything so that I always have enough. And so, like I said, I could talk about this forever and a half, but my encouragement for you with this one is to simply enjoy your life, enjoy every moment, because it is rare and you're never going to get it again. Be present with your whatever is in front of you, and know that there is an abundant supply of whatever is in front of you. If you have $10,000, $100, or $10, enjoy that $10. Enjoy the $100. Enjoy the $10,000. Don't worry about where the next 10 is going to come from, or don't try to plan or figure out what's going to happen next, or how will you survive after this. Just like begin to play with that concept of abundant supply, and more will always come. Because if you grew up, or maybe were conditioned in an environment where you didn't feel there was an abundant supply, maybe your parents were always worried about money, or maybe you always felt like you had to chase for the things you wanted and nothing ever came easy, then this is going to be a struggle for you. This was the struggle for me for a long time, and it still is in many ways. It keeps showing up, but it's not about making that a problem. It's just about learning to move with it, and learning how to slowly but steadily really unlearn and detach from these things, because we're noticing they're not serving us, and it's okay for them to still exist. They're not just going to go away just like that. But once you notice that it's not serving you, beginning to play with the alternate concept. So in this case, there is an abundant supply. What would that look like if I believe there is an abundant supply of what I have in front of me right now that I'm afraid of losing forever? And just releasing it, enjoying it for what it is, and letting whatever will come next to come. Okay, that's it for this week's episode. Super simple. I thought I would give you a little heart-to-heart. And if you saw me on the video podcast reading my journal, this is my I Am Her journal. I started this at the beginning of my trip, and look how far I am. I'm almost 3/4 in. There's only a quarter left, and I've just had this journal for less than 2.5 months. So actually less than 2 months. So I've been journaling like crazy, and I thought I would share with you some personal sentiments for this episode, because we're coming to basically the midpoint and a little more for my surrender experiment trip, and it's been a very, very life-changing journey, and I know there's more to come, so I will continue to share with you guys. Stay tuned on the podcast. I hope you enjoyed this little personal one, and I'll tune in with you next week.